during the show. So we're going to spend our time today mostly on the transit issue because it's a huge issue in town for a whole bunch of reasons. And council led one of the most dysfunctional and longest debates I've ever seen on this issue on Wednesday. If you didn't catch it live like I was able to, you've probably heard about it by now. It was called an orgy of indecision by the Hamilton Spectator, and I don't even think that comes close to the disappointing performances and comments that were expressed during this meeting. So what we've got here on the O Show for you is we picked the clips that we thought were most significant coming out of the meeting. It's not about what side of the bus lane you're on. It's about the bigger functionality, I think, of council and whether they have a vision or not and exactly how they play by the rules, hence that off-the-record conversation that Joey Coleman's camera caught that we'll show you in a few minutes. So let's look at the first clip, and we're going to start with this one because this is Sam Marula, a councillor who's been around the table for a long time, explaining the history that Hamilton has on being short-sighted with transit decisions, and it's funny and a little bit sad. Let's listen to Sam.
I do believe you want to be ahead of that curve, and a light rail, I can almost certainly say, is going to take you 5 to 10 years to build, and frankly, the construction is going to be a painful issue.
Right, and as was the expressway, and but we worked through that because we realized and we had the vision to work through that. And through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'm going to make the comparison again to the expressway because I can recall that the sky was falling about the expressway. We were going to be spending almost $1 billion and or $200 some odd million for the Red Hill, and vacancy rates were going to be decreased, and air quality would worsen, and Ottawa Street would be desolate, and Centre Mall would be demolished, property values would be decreased, Lower City would basically not even exist. You might as well just have a tsunami. What happened? What happened was the complete opposite. Okay, and we stood steadfastly against that opposition because I believed in it as I do this, and I say we got to grow up here because we need to move forward and have the courage to do so accordingly. And I appreciate your time, and I'll come back to the remainder of my speech later. Thank you.
Loren.
Well, I think that if Sam wants to make a comparison between Red Hill and the buses, I'm not sure that that he's brought the same side to match the other side. The anti-Red Hill are very similar in their tone as the pro-bus. So I'm not sure where the sky is falling on the bus issue at all. I don't see the merit in drawing that comparison.
I took what he was talking about more, and he also mentioned apparently a subway we almost had on the mountain in the 50s that got kiboshed because of indecision around the council table or bickering or I forget exactly how he characterized it, dithering. But he brought this up because, I mean, this was maybe an hour or two into this marathon session that was circular. I mean, there were 4 motions proposed and they vote all of them down. This was the kind of dysfunctional meeting that it was. And as I said, we've got some video that might explain some of the games going on behind the scenes and why it was all so dysfunctional. And we'll show that to you. But I think that's what his point was. His point was, let's look at the history of this council's bad decisions on transit.
But I think the only way that can be done is Red Hill and LRT, not bus lane. Bus lane is not a major decision.
He was tying this to the LRT, and that's the point with this bus lane. This is not about a 2-mile or 2-kilometer stretch of bus lane that was clumsily put in and badly communicated and has some problems with it. Sam Marula, as many others have, is tying this to the fact that if we get $400,000 or $100,000 from Metrolinx to try a pilot on something, we try to kibosh it before we even get the report back. And then when the report comes back, it's dismissed. Some people, even councillors, even accusing there being bias in the report. Everyone goes to their ideological corners, and we look like, if we can't do this for $100,000, how are we supposed to take $800 million from Metrolinx? That's what Sam is saying.
I get that's what Sam's saying.
So that hence the comparison.
Right, but I'm not sure that Sam's in a position to connect those provincial dots. We're not hearing that from anybody at the provincial level.
Right, and Dixon, who was there as the manager of transportation, by the way, his first time in front of council, he said, you know, he doesn't think that one is connected to the other, but to the narrative in Hamilton about what is our transit future and how much are we willing to risk and invest and what kind of discomfort will we live with to get a more progressive transit system, I think it is germane to the broader discussion.
It's a truly Hamilton ideology that Toronto is watching us with bated breath for all.
Well, and Sam goes further than that. He says Toronto is watching, waiting for us to fail. I mean, he takes it to the point of almost a conspiracy that they're sitting around hoping that we mess this up. I mean, and that's Sam, and that's how Sam does things. But I think that the analogy is apt because this is, to many people, about a broader thing. If council can't do this small project that's caused some disruption and some, definitely even more than inconvenience to some businesses, I'm not negating that, how can they possibly go through the process of fully modernizing transit, Loren? It's a huge thing to rip up miles and miles and miles of a main street to put in LRT.
Absolutely.
It takes planning and commitment and sacrifice and leadership, and that is what was so missing during this particular discussion. And I want to roll this next clip because when I heard this come out of a councillor's mouth, Terry Whitehead, I almost fell off my chair. And I think there are buttons and t-shirts being made up on this line. I'll explain why. Let's have a look.
The challenge here is there's only a 2-kilometer stretch. I acknowledge that a bus lane inevitably, when we hit those thresholds, we will have to implement. Without question, we will have to do that in the future. The future's not now. Staff made it pretty clear it's not now.
Loren.
So there's been a lot of up and down railing and otherwise on that isolated quote, and some discussion about, you know, that the city needs to assume best practices and
That's what Terry's saying. He's talking about best practices.
But the HSR, prior to former Councillor McCaddy moving a motion to put in a trial bus lane, said that as per their recommendations, it's not even close. The HSR, this isn't an opinion, and Dixon said the same thing there. You need 2,000 was the threshold for it.
And he also said, but you need to do stuff like this to build the ridership.
But wait a second, ridership hasn't increased by 2 kilometers being 1 minute faster.
Right.
That doesn't increase capacity. And LRT is not going to happen until the province sees that we have a need for it.
But
not a need for it from development, but enough people taking public transit.
But there has to be, to get to that critical capacity, there has to be, as Dixon said almost 3 or 4 times, council has a choice. They can lead that process where they do things like this and other things, other measures to try to build the transit users numbers to get up to that capacity, or they can let it happen organically.
But transit wasn't in favor of this before. They said we're just slightly more than half.
They said they want to continue this pilot. They think it's important. They want to change it up and make some amendments.